This is the first time in 65 years and only the second time in history that the United States has shared its nuclear propulsion technology, and we thank you for it.
A long-range, nuclear-powered capable submarine will be at the heart of Australia's future projection.
Look, Labor has got all the big ones basically right in the 20th century, but this one is where we break the winning streak.
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and his government may have briefly basked in the sense yesterday that its momentous commitment to buy US nuclear-powered submarines and later to jointly build British ones may have finally addressed Labor's long political vulnerability on national security. If nothing else, the Coalition's unconditional support of the policy seemed to suggest it would not be a matter of political contention. But at the Press Club today, former Prime Minister Paul Keating's savage criticism of his own party's policy decision was devastating.
What Anthony Albanese has done this week, he screwed into place the last shackle in the long chain which the Americans have laid out to contain China. We are now part of a containment policy against China.
Keating's critique was comprehensive. He wanted to know, for starters, exactly what was the nature of the threat to Australia.
Underlying all this stuff about the need of nuclear power is the idea that China has threatened us or will threaten us. Now, this is a distortion and it's untrue. The Chinese have never implied that they would threaten us or said it explicitly. But what threaten us means is an invasion of Australia. You know, the idea that we need American submarines to protect us, you know, if we buy 8, 3 are at sea, 3 are going to protect us from the might of China. Really? I mean, the rubbish of it.
He also said that even if this threat was real, the policy unveiled yesterday didn't actually deal with that threat. He says new nuclear-powered submarines represent a complete departure from the defence strategy embodied by the current Collins-class submarines.
A 4,000-tonne boat like the Collins worked perfectly around the Australian coast because it was designed to protect Australia. It wasn't designed to sit off the Chinese coast sinking Chinese submarines. The Chinese can also shoot our submarines because we're in the shallow water and we are detectable. Right, so this is a strange way to be defending Australia, to have your submarines sunk on the Chinese continental shelf.
Keating argues the nuclear submarine strategy is about backing American dominance in the Pacific, not the defence of Australia.
What the Americans are trying to do is deny the Chinese a second strike capability. And we'd be the mugs up there helping them. We don't need 8,000-tonne submarines. Collins was 4. We could have 50 Collins-class boats and 15 at sea, and we'd have a much stronger defence than this rubbish that the government's doing.
Perhaps his most devastating critique, though, was about why Labor had decided to wholeheartedly support the Morrison government's commitment to AUKUS and how it had gone about it. He said a neocon security establishment had sold the AUKUS strategy to Scott Morrison, but Anthony Albanese had chosen to rely on, quote, 2 seriously unwise ministers, Penny Wong and Richard Marles, who had earlier decided to not allow Labor to be wedged on foreign policy and defence matters.
We were briefed on the Wednesday afternoon, myself, Brendan, Richard Marles and Penny Wong, and the advice was clear, and we took that clear advice and we made a very clear, sober decision. I'm proud of what we did in less than 24 hours.
With no notice to the Labor Party, they call them in at 4 o'clock one afternoon and see Albanese, Wong and Marles, and at 10 a.m. the following morning they have taken the policy in its entirety to board. And the Prime Minister's running around recently saying, I was very proud to be able to take that policy in 24 hours.
Labor welcomes the Australia-UK-US agreement.
Well, how would you take a policy which is going to cost this much money, have these consequences for our relations, A, with China, with the region, B, in terms of our industrial base? How would you do this in 24 hours? You can only do it if you have no perceptive ability to understand the weight of the decisions you're being asked to make. It's, you know, other people call it incompetence.
If there is foreign oversight or supervision or assistance without which that capability cannot be deployed, then it is not fully sovereign, because if the other country said, you know what, we don't want to help you anymore with this, then you're stuck.
Paul Keating was not the only former Prime Minister to question yesterday's announcement today. Malcolm Turnbull famously did the deal with French President Emmanuel Macron to buy submarines, but he joined the criticisms today of the New Deal, arguing our lack of nuclear capability alone would make Australia dependent on our AUKUS partners.
Now, if we are able to set up our own nuclear supervision regime, our own regulatory agencies, and do all that from a standing start, from having nothing that, meets those requirements today, and if we do that to the satisfaction of the Americans and the British, then it may well be that those submarines will be under sovereign control. But boy, there's a long way to go before we can say that.
The reactor is run by the Americans, the control system is run by the Americans. Our sovereignty is just being peeled away by all this.
There are billions of dollars going from Australia into the industrial shipbuilding base of both the United States and the United Kingdom. There will be money spent in Australia as well, of course, substantial amounts of money, but there is the big winners here financially are British shipbuilders and American submarine builders.
I'd say in those branches of ours, when they work out that we have returned to Britain 230 years after we left, after the British dumped us all through these years, that we're going to bail the British BAE Systems and British aerospace companies and submarine companies out.
Despite the bipartisanship on AUKUS, Paul Keating clearly believes his views reflect those of Labor's rank and file.
I'd say the majority of Labor people would share my view about this. I think there'll be a big reaction to what the government's doing. I mean, there's no mandate inside the Labor Party, no mandate for what Prime Minister Albanese, Foreign Minister Penny Wong and Richard Marles are doing. No mandate.